Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. My guest today is Curt Fulster. Curt, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you doing, TC?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining the show. Hey, on this show, I typically encourage my guests to do their own introductions. So first of all, thanks so much for coming on. But I would love if you could, in your own words, just kind of tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So during the day, I'm an electrician. Still doing that right now. But then I am a children's author. I have 15 children's picture books. I just released my first young adult horror novel. And I've written a few screenplays, and I've written an animated short film and produced it. And that one's gone on to win a couple international awards.
Wow. So you've done, you do quite a lot of different things. Talk a little bit about the writing. Is this something that you've always done or you've done for years or something you've kind of recently gotten into? Talk a little bit about your journey there.
I actually haven't. It kind of spurred out of nowhere. I used to teach when I was about 19 to 25 or so. I taught youth hockey, and one of the days I was talking to a parent, and we got on the conversation of children's books, and he told me that his kid hated reading. And so I mentioned Dr. Seuss and stuff, and he said his kid said all those books are old. So I was like, well, maybe I could come up with a decent idea for a children's book. So I decided to try that, and I wrote a book and did pretty decent, and people liked it. And so I wrote another and just kind of realized I really enjoyed writing, and it was fun kind of making up stories and kind of making my own thing and going wherever I wanted with it. And I just kept going and kind of turned into all this.
That's awesome. So, and how many, you said, is it 15 children's books that you've written?
15. I do have one more I'm currently working on that I'm hoping will come out 6 months or so. But yeah, I'll soon have 16, but yeah, 15 right now.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, but you don't only do the children's books. You also, the one you recently working on was something totally different, right? Talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, I've been teased about that because, zombie books and children's books go hand in hand so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, I've always been a big fan of zombie movies and books and video games and everything. And yeah, just kind of going through doing children's books and the screenplays and stuff, and just kind of sitting around one day, and I was like, I really wish there was like a zombie movie or book or something that was kind of like this, and like started talking to my wife about it, and then I was like I can write pretty decent. Maybe I just try writing this, and kind of just blossomed and started enjoying it, and I was like, I actually really like this.
That's cool. So that is quite a jump, and that's why I want to ask about it, to go from the children's stories to like, and it's like this is like an R-rated, like pretty intense zombie book, right?
Yeah, it's a young adult book, but there's definitely, there's a couple cuss words and stuff, but yeah, and that was more of one of the weirder parts of it was, I remember when I was writing it, I was going through and I got to one of the scenes where it was supposed to be pretty graphic, and I remember looking at my wife and I was like, I don't know how violent I can get, and she's like, well, you've written children's books, like you can be violent, people understand zombies aren't children's book things, you can get a little more grotesque with it. And so yeah, I started writing the scene and I was like, yeah, like this, yeah, I can be a little more grotesque and violent and kind of paint a picture a little different than I would for a kid's book.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So this podcast, I try to encourage and inspire writers and creative people, entrepreneurs, anybody really who's got a goal or a big idea like writing books or doing something like that. And I think a lot of the reason why so many people don't In fact, I think you sent me something on Instagram the other day about like the percentage of people that say they want to write a something versus the people who actually do, or something like that. And it's just crazy and mind blowing. I think one of the reasons so many people don't is because they have so many fears and challenges that they feel like they have to overcome, whether they're real ones or just ones that they imagine in their own head. But I'm curious from your perspective, like what are some of those fears or challenges that you've dealt with in your writing journey?
Couple of the fears, I would say two of the biggest ones that kind of jump to mind are, is anyone gonna like this? Kind of, is this gonna be worth it? That type of fear, but also the fear of, I guess, rejection and people kind of, I guess it goes kind of hand in hand, but yeah, rejection and people liking it and will it sell, kind of things like that.
Mm.
And the one thing I realized with that is, I mean, in a way, it doesn't matter. To me, the more I've written, the more I've realized, do you enjoy it? Because if you enjoy it, that's kind of just part of the process. And if you enjoy the process, yeah, it might take a few years, but like you can turn it into something that can make money, and eventually somebody's going to pick it up and see it. And there's so many people out there, somebody's going to enjoy it, even if it is 100 people, 10 people, 1,000 people. I mean, you never know, but I feel like no matter what you write, somebody's out there that would enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's good perspective. And I think one of the things you said too is like it's really important to do something that you enjoy, because if you're doing it just to sell books or just to make money or just, whatever, like eventually the challenges or the, the frustration is going to become too much. But if you're doing something that you truly enjoy, that you really love, then that motivation can keep you going even in those seasons where maybe you're not selling like you thought you would, or it's harder than you thought it was going to be, or something like that. So I think that's awesome. A great perspective.
Yeah, because I think one thing with that is, the more books I've written, the more I've realized it is a process. And if you're in the process just to make money and you release that first book and you realize, oh, I'm not making $1 million off my first book. If that's all you're wanting, you're not gonna, and you don't like the process, I feel like you'll drop it. Where if you
Yeah,
enjoy the process and your first book makes $100, you're not gonna care because you're just gonna want to jump back into the process and make a second book.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes too, a lot, like some of these books can like they can have a long tail in terms of like when they're going to sell, and how, like you said, there's so many people out there in the world, like you never know what's going to be the catalyst for somebody discovering you and your writing, and it could be months or even years after you release something, right?
Mhm.
So just having continuing to do the work and doing something you love, I think is so critical.
Exactly.
Talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, talk about kind of your writing process. Like, do you have a specific like place that you write, tools that you use, like goals when you sit down to write? Because it sounds like you've been at this for a while,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming that you've got some kind of maybe practice rhythms or go to kind of tools or techniques that you use. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about kind of you as a writer and what that process looks like for you.
Yeah, in the beginning, I actually just started with a notebook and a pen.
Yeah.
And I know probably the first 5 or 6 children's books, that's how I did it because I felt more connected to the book doing it that way. And eventually, I moved to Microsoft Word and just just using my computer. But I just like getting into like the story idea. And the way I usually do my process is I start with, and I don't know why, but I always start with what ending do I think would be good,
Mm,
and kind of generally like what types of characters would be in this, what ending do I see with this, and kind of start with that, and then I just from, I guess, more of the moral of the story type of thing, then I kind of branch from there and just kind of build upon it. And what characters do I see, what characters would I connect with, is usually kind of how I go, is what things do I personally want to see in the book, and just kind of slowly build from there. And on your point of like where do I write and stuff, I kind of write all over. I have a laptop, so I usually write in the living room sometimes, and I have an office, so I write in there sometimes. It's just kind of wherever and whenever I'm really feeling it. If, and since I work as an electrician, sometimes I'll be at work and just like the whole 8 hour day, the story is just kind of sitting on my mind and just running. And by the
mm,
time I get home, I ask for I asked my wife, hey, can you watch the baby for an hour so I can go write, and kind of just do that type of thing. But the other thing I do is that I kind of feel like has turned into a hack is I realized you can text yourself. And
Oh yeah.
so whenever I get an idea, I just, even if it's a word, if it's a sentence, even if it's a paragraph, I just quick text myself at work, and then I have it right there for when I get home. I can just jump right in.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So you grab it, like the idea comes, you shoot a quick text to yourself, and then you refer back to it later when you get home or after the baby's asleep or whatever. I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. So what about as you've gone on this journey of writing and you've written multiple children's books, you've gotten at least one screenplay, another novel, right? I mean, the zombie one is a novel, right? So what are some of the best lessons that you've learned or maybe things that you've learned about yourself as a writer?
I would probably start with I I thought I was going to struggle with stories, and I thought it was going to be really difficult for me to come up with stories because I've always heard that that's a lot of people struggle with that, and it's really difficult. For me personally, I feel like I have too many stories to write, and that's actually been the easiest part. For me, it's been trying to hit all the points I want to hit during the story. That's been the hardest part for me, but I think generally I've I've just realized about myself that like I like this way more than I thought I would.
Mm,
And even changing between children's books and zombie novels and everything, I realize it's not even set to children's books or anything. It's the children's books and the zombie novels are so different, but I just enjoy storytelling and just creating something that someone else sees or reads or whatever and just connects with it, and they're like, "Oh my god, I connected with this so well." Like one of my children's books, the moral is about dealing with someone passing on.
mm,
And I remember I didn't know how that was going to be received, and I worked with a charity on it, and one of the members of the charity dared me to write it about someone passing on. And I was kind of scared. I was like, I don't know how this is going to do or if people are going to hate it. And so many people came around and were like, this is such a great idea, and this like connected with me so personally because I've had to deal with my grandfather, my mom, my dad, a friend passing on, and they're like, this, it just hit really personally. And I realized the more I got into stories that a lot of stories, no matter what they're on, they connect with someone personally.
yeah. Yeah, you're talking about even in the children's stories, you're talking about like aspects of life that I imagine are pretty universal, like losing someone you love or something like that. Like that's everyone is going to have to navigate that at some point, whether you have already or you will in the future. And so, yeah, I think that's great. Like those things are going to resonate with people really kind of across all cultures and time periods, right? Like everyone is going to have to walk through those seasons. So I think it's great that you even like I don't know that I would have taken that on if I were in your position because it can be like a sensitive topic, right? Especially for kids. But
Yeah, and
but an
that was the
important one, I
hardest
think.
part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the hardest part was especially because when she challenged me, it was kind of like she asked if I could do it, and I was like, I can try, but it was how do you describe death to a 5-year-old or something? And so I had to
Yeah.
come up, and that's kind of what made it more fun though, was like it was a pretty big challenge of like how would you tell a 5-year-old that someone died?
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. So I wonder, as we talk about some of the work that you've done, I'm curious. Well, a couple things. First, like what's next for you? So you've kind of done a wide range of different creative endeavors in terms of your writing. Are you going to feel like you're going to stick into the horror like zombie lane? Are you going to do more children's books? Sounds like you've got maybe another one in the works or something totally different.
Right now, I do have one more children's book that I got to finish, and I'm hoping to finish within the next few months or so. But besides that children's book, the the zombie or God, the zombie novel that I'm finishing, I just finished. I have two more coming because it will be a trilogy. So I
Okay.
have those other two coming. I do have a fourth and a fifth idea for the zombie trilogy. so it may turn into a little more like a series. So
Yeah.
that could easily grow a lot more. But I do also like the animated screenplay stuff, so I plan to work on that as well. So
Okay.
a lot going on, but hopefully I can spread it out over a good amount of time.
Well, that's yeah. Well, my other question is, how do you find the time to do this? Because it sounds like you've got a full-time job, you got a family, you got a baby, right? Like, where do you fit this into your day? Like, are you getting up early usually, or is it more like, when you get home from work, or kind of like talk a little bit about like how do you find the time? Because that's another thing that I feel like a lot of people who want to do something, like they will rationalize it away by saying, yeah, but I just don't have time. So how do you find the time?
It it is hard, and as much as I wish I didn't have a day job and I could just sit down and spend 6 to 8 hours, 10 hours writing, you do just kind of find it where you can. I know since I'm an electrician, I got to wake up pretty early, so for me, it's more of a night thing.
Mm,
Sometimes I kind of go into it knowing I'm going to suffer the next day and be a little tired and groggy, but typically I do the night thing, and I kind of work it out with my wife here and there too of, hey, can you take a little more of the responsibility tonight? Can I get an extra hour, 2 hours tonight to write? Or if she's really tired and she goes to bed early, then even if it's just an hour, then I take my laptop and go sit in the dark, no TV, no nothing, and just sit there and just write. It's kind of more. It turns into one of those, you write at any moment you get the chance to. I do know having your phone and scrolling through Instagram and stuff can be kind of dangerous, but it is like when I have the stories on my mind, all I want to do is jump into them. So I take any second I can, and I mean, even an hour a day or half hour a day, if you do it over a month or even 2 months or 3 months, it starts adding up, and you can start seeing some good results.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, that's cool. So a lot of the people that I've interviewed on this show are working on their first book. And so I've asked those people oftentimes, like, do you have a moment in your mind where, you've crossed the finish line, and, for some people it's like holding the copy of their book in their hand for the first time, or seeing it, on Amazon or at the shelf in the bookstore or whatever. That's kind of like that, that moment that you like, that big milestone that you'll remember forever. So I'll kind of shift the question for you. What have been some of those for you along the journey? And maybe are there more that you're looking forward to in the future? Talk a little bit about that.
I think I have a lot for the future. I have a whole list of things, and in the beginning, that is one thing that it's crazy how fast it can grow and change. But I remember when I started writing my first book, it was seeing it on Amazon and like it hitting you of, oh my god, that cover looks familiar, and it's just kind of a cool, unusual feeling. But also when you order your first book and you do hold it in your hands and you're like, holy crap, I actually created this. This is
Yeah.
my brain made this in my hand, and it is a really it gives you tingles, and like it's hard to express it, but it's just such a different feeling of like, I created something that someone else can now buy and they can enjoy and they can read to their family. It's really cool. I think my moments were definitely the first book, holding it, seeing it online, things like that. I would say that another one was winning an award for the animated short film. It was kind of the same feeling, but slightly different, but it was like a verification that what I did people enjoyed, and
Yeah.
I don't know how many people I might have beat out. It could have only been one or two, but it was
But you beat
it
him.
was nice having validation. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Uh, but yeah, I think besides of that, I think now one of my biggest goals is to quit my day job. That's one of the bigger ones, which who knows if that'll happen or if it's going to happen in a month. I never know, but yeah, that, and with working on these screenplays, I think another big one, which I don't know if it'll ever happen, is getting having my name on a movie. I think that would be pretty awesome.
Cool. Well, I love hearing you talk about, you when you get the idea, like, I just have to write, like, that's all I want to do is go write. And to me, that speaks to the idea that like, that's what you should be doing. You know what I mean? Like, this is not just a thing that you're doing for fun. That's like a side thing. Like, this is part of who you are. And so, yeah, I just think that's really cool. And so I just want to encourage you in that. Like, I can hear it in your voice when you talk about your work and talk about what you're doing. Like, this guy is a writer, no question about it. So that's
And
awesome.
it's definitely a double-edged sword of, I almost feel like it tortures me at work because I'm sitting there. I mean, I could get to work and half hour into work, I'm like, oh my God, I just got this great idea for this scene in the book. And then I have to sit there for 7.5 hours and just think about it and like, I wish I could write it.
Right.
But I feel like it gives me that little extra momentum of like, I get home and I've been thinking about it for 7.5 hours. So all I want to do is just get down and write it. And as soon as I feel like it almost builds a fire to where when I start writing then, and I get that into the book, then I just go. And so if I get an hour to write, I could do some of the best writing because I've just been sitting on that idea all day.
That's right. Yeah. Even though you haven't been sitting down doing it, like it's been swirling around in your mind, like things have been developed, right. And iterating, I guess. And then now you get to just do the fun part of like putting it down on the page. So that's cool.
Yep.
Well, Curt, this show is again to encourage and inspire new writers or people who want to become writers or entrepreneurs or podcasters or whatever. People like you and me who are working a 9 to 5, but then decide, hey, I want to do something else too. And maybe one day, like who knows, maybe this thing will take off, and this is what I'll do full time. But I think there are so many people out there who have a thought that they would like to do it, but never do. And one of the key ingredients that I think a lot of people are missing is encouragement. And so I kind of a two-part question for you. Number one, has there been any particularly encouraging things that someone has said or done for you in your journey? And then part B would be like, what encouragement would you offer to someone who's brand new, just getting started?
I think one of the most encouraging things for me, and it may help to hear that I've had a lot of not encouraging people in my life. I've had people put me down with it. I think it's just part of it. But I would say the most encouraging thing I had was my wife telling me if I ever quit writing, because going through all these books, I've questioned whether it's worth it, whether I should keep doing it. And she told me if I ever quit and I still love writing, she'll divorce me. So I think that's been the most encouraging thing. Because I go back to that even now, and I have the days where I'm like, this is stupid, this isn't worth it. I'm not even that good of a writer. I should just quit. And I always think of her saying, do I still love it? And I always go back to, no, I still love it. I need to keep doing it. Even if I'm not quitting my day job, even if I'm having to go to work super tired just because I've been up all night writing, I still love it. So I gotta keep going. And I think on encouragement, I would say the biggest thing for me in the beginning was I didn't want to fail. And I think it's one of those things you got to understand you're going to fail. Even with all the books I have, I still fail. I still have releases that don't look good, and I still make mistakes that even cost me a little bit of money sometimes. It's just kind of, and it's kind of just part of the process. And as much as the process isn't fun sometimes, and sometimes it really sucks, even now I've been trying to do it more and more, is convincing myself that it's just part of the process. That's how it works. The process is learning, the process is growing, the process is all of that. And I mean, you got to start the process to get into it.
That's really good advice. I think that fear of failure is one of the big roadblocks for a lot of people. And I think there's also like, there is this kind of expectation of like, hey, you're gonna strike out sometimes. It's not always gonna go exactly the way you want. But I think there's also like a shift that we can make where we can kind of redefine what success and failure means, right? Like, to me early on, it was like I had this idea that it was all or nothing. Like, I'm going to be New York Times bestseller and, retire from my job and go buy a beach house, or it's not worth it. And like, I don't know if that, like, if that's your metric, like, the chances are really good that you're not going to hit that mark. Like you might, but you probably won't. But if your goal is, hey, I just want to get this idea out and publish this thing and see what happens, that's still success. Or even if you just like, hey, I'm going to write a first draft and see if if this is going to take off, or if I even want to continue it. Like as you stumble along the way and as you kind of have these frustrations and these failures, like you continue to grow, you continue to learn, you continue to get better at your craft. And like, so to me, it's like, yes, some people could talk about that as failure, but to me, it's like, man, this is just an opportunity to keep learning and to keep improving and get better and better and learn more about yourself as an artist and learn more about what you're good at, where you need to maybe get better at certain things and where you can lean on other people for help. Like all of that stuff to me is like a super important part of the process. And really, like from my perspective, the only real failure is stopping. Because like if you fall down and get back up, well, you're still in the race. Like you're still doing it. So yeah, I that's great, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Because especially with books, the one thing I realized is even if you write a novel and you write the first chapter out, even if it's a rough draft, whatever, no matter what, you still have that. You could say, I don't really like it and put it off to the side. You could keep it on your computer or whatever for a year and come back, and you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from your rough draft of chapter 1. So it's not like you have to completely start over. You can let it sit for 5 years and you still have your rough draft of chapter 1. And I think that's the other thing that kind of got me excited about even the first book was as soon as it was released and it was out there, I realized, and especially when I had a copy in my hand, it kind of hit me that 30 years from now, when I may not be writing or anything, that book is still out there. No matter what, that book is out there and someone could have it. Even if you stopped writing, it's Amazon's gone, whatever's going on, that book is still a thing and it's still out there. So even if you write a book and you say, I don't really like this, it's not that fun, your book is still out there. You still created something that's in the world.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So when I first started, I had three like ideas that I kind of loved equally but I was like, you can't write them all. So I actually but I did though. I started writing like the first couple chapters of each one. And then I shared those with a handful of people and said, hey, which of these sounds the most interesting to you? And so I ended up going with the one that I wanted to go with initially, I think anyway. But those other two, like I went back and looked at one of them recently and I hadn't looked at it in probably a year, but I looked back at it and I was like, man, this is really good. So I got fired up again about continuing this one at some point. Right. So I think that's great. Like no writing is wasted, even if it never sees the light of day in terms of publishing or whatever. Like it gets you the practice and the rhythm. And like, it's just like stepping back up to the plate and, getting those at bats, like just makes you better. So yeah, I think that's great. Okay. You've been at this for a while, but I'm curious if there's one thing, like go back to when you just got started. Is there like one thing you wish you had known, wish someone had told you way back then? What would that be?
One thing I've been kind of going over and dealing more with now that I wish I would have known in the beginning, and I'm still trying to get used to, is that this is just a process. It's you gotta trust the process. It's got its highs and lows. It's got its ups and downs. You're gonna have failures, and it's just all part of the process. It's just kind of how it goes. And the one thing, even when you're having your lowest or your doubts or anything, just trust the process and keep going. And I feel like I wish I knew that when I started, because especially now that's kind of getting me through some of the rocky times, is it's just part of the process and how it goes.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any resources that have helped you in your journey that you would encourage other people to connect with? So think like podcasts, books, things that have helped you as an author that you would recommend to other people.
I think, and for me, with having a day job, one thing that I feel like I utilized a ton was audiobooks. Because I would just put a headphone in and put an audiobook on, and I'm working, but at the same time while I'm working, I'm just getting fed information over and over and over. And I even, some of those audiobooks I listen to 3 or 4 times or so over a month, and it it it's just constant information, and it almost drives it into your head more to where you really know it. But I would say audiobooks, a few of the ones I liked were by Joanna Penn, and she does a lot of self-help kind of books for getting started. So anyone that wants to be an author, maybe even is just questioning it, you could check out any of her books, and they're not too badly priced. But a lot of her self-help books, there's some on marketing, there's some just on writing. That was one thing I didn't realize, is there's a ton of books that are just on writing, character development, and a number of things. So even if there's something, if somebody wants to write but they're like, oh, I'm not that good at character, you can find a self-help audiobook or ebook or whatever on just character development. And I feel like you can almost find whatever niche you don't think you're that strong at. The other thing I would say is podcasts. I know podcast, I kind of had trouble with finding ones. I enjoyed that were also for things I liked, but I know writing wise, and it's kind of similar, kind of not, but one I liked is the Screenwriting Life, and it is with screenplays and movies and stuff. But I feel like they also had a lot of tips that I felt kind of matched with either screenwriting or authors. But they had a number of people come on that talked about their stories and how they built them and things like that, to where I feel like either side could use that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, especially fiction writers, like it's telling a story. So yeah, that translates pretty well, I would imagine. Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Last question, Curt. This is an easy one. How do people connect with you, buy your books, follow your journey? Like, give me your website, social media. How do people kind of follow along with what you're doing?
On social media, I split my 2 social medias. So now I have C Fulster, which is all my children's book, and C Fulster, which is my novels. And the only difference is C Fulster or Fulster with a Y at the end. But anyone can check me out at C Fulster Author for all social medias, Twitter, Instagram, things like that. And then my website is cfulster.com or cfulstybooks.com.
Awesome. Well, Curt, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much for joining, and good luck. I know you had your new one recently come out, so good luck with that, and good luck in the future, man. I can't wait to see all the stuff you're going to do.
Awesome. Thanks, TC. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
You got it. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.